The morning of change. The morning sun cast long golden beams across the sleepy town of Maple Ridge, stirring the residents into the rhythm of another day. For Clara Hart, a waitress at Maple Ridge Cafe, mornings were a blend of coffee beans grinding, bacon sizzling, and cheerful chatter from the cafe regulars. Her life was a sequence of routines tied to her work apron, a stack of menus, and a tip jar. It wasn't the life she dreamed of, but it was steady. And for Clara, steady was enough. Clara worked with a quiet diligence, her energy reserved for the moments between placing orders and refilling cups. She had a way of remembering customers' preferences, a splash of cream for Mr. Dawson's coffee, a sprinkle of cinnamon for Mrs. Wheeler's hot chocolate. It was this attention to detail that earned her a small but loyal following among the cafe patrons. Her boss, Tom Burton, was another story. Tom was a sharp-eyed, profit-driven man who ran the cafe like a tight ship. To him, rules were sacred, and breaking them was grounds for dismissal, no questions asked. The morning rush had just begun when Clara noticed a figure seated on the bench outside the cafe. He was a man in his late 50s, dressed in clothes so threadbare they barely held together. His beard was overgrown, and his hands, resting on his knees, were marked by dirt and weather. He looked through the window with hollow eyes, his gaze fixed on the steaming plates inside. Clara recognized hunger when she saw it. Her heart tightened as she watched him shiver in the chilly autumn air. She glanced around the cafe, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. It was against the rules. Tom had made that clear, but something deeper than rules stirred within her. Clara inhaled deeply, braced herself, and scooped a plate of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast from the ready-to-serve counter. Grabbing a to-go cup, she filled it with hot coffee, then stepped outside. The world seemed quieter on the other side of the glass. She walked up to the man, her steps careful, her voice soft. "Sir," she said, holding the plate out to him. "This is for you. It's fresh, and there's coffee too. Please take it." The man hesitated, his gaze darting between her face and the plate. I can't pay," he murmured, his voice hoarse from disuse. "You don't have to," Clara replied firmly. "Just eat." The man took the plate with trembling hands, his gratitude etched into the lines of his face. He managed a small smile and whispered, "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "It's Clara," she said, stepping back to let him eat in peace. "And you're welcome." When Clara returned inside, she tried to slip back into the routine, but her heart was still outside, sitting on that bench. She turned to find Tom glaring at her from across the cafe. His face was a storm cloud, and Clara knew she'd crossed a line. "Clara," Tom barked, his voice carrying across the cafe. Every head turned toward them. "What in the world do you think you're doing?" Clara hesitated, her cheeks burning under the weight of all those eyes. "He was hungry, Tom," she said. "I couldn't just ignore him." "This is a business, not a soup kitchen," Tom snapped, his voice rising. "You don't give away food for free. Do you understand me? You're fired." A collective gasp echoed through the cafe. Clara's heart sank, but a small ember of defiance flared within her. She untied her apron, placed it neatly on the counter, and met Tom's glare with steady resolve. "Kindness isn't a crime," she said. "If helping someone costs me this job, so be it." She turned and walked out, leaving behind the stunned silence of the cafe and the warmth of a life she had known for years. Outside, the man on the bench looked up, his expression torn between gratitude and guilt. "I'm so sorry," he began. "You didn't have to." Clara cut him off with a smile. "You don't need to apologize. You needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That's all." Before the man could respond, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a dark suit. His presence was commanding, his stride purposeful. He glanced at Clara, then at the man on the bench, before finally speaking. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I couldn't help but notice what just happened. Are you Clara?" Yes, she replied, unsure of what to make of the stranger. My name is Victor Kane, he said, extending a hand. I'm a philanthropist and the director of the Ridgewell Foundation. I've been looking for someone like you. Someone like me? Clara asked, puzzled. Someone who isn't afraid to act on their values, Victor explained. Compassion is rare, and courage is rarer still. Would you have a moment to talk? There might be an opportunity for you with my organization. Clara hesitated, her mind racing. The morning had taken an unexpected turn, and she wasn't sure where it would lead. But as she glanced back at the man on the bench, now finishing his meal with a small but contented smile, she felt the stirrings of hope. Okay, she said, nodding. I'm listening. Victor gestured toward his car. Let's go somewhere quieter. I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. And so Clara took her first step into a new chapter, leaving behind the cafe and stepping into a world of unknown possibilities. Little did she know, this small act of kindness would ripple outward, changing not just her life, but the lives of many others. The path less traveled. Victor Kane's car had a smell Clara wasn't used to, leather and faint cologne, a far cry from the aroma of coffee and grease that clung to her clothes. She sat stiffly in the passenger seat, the morning's events replaying in her mind. Fired, embarrassed, but also hopeful. Victor had the air of someone who was both kind and purposeful. His tailored suit, polished shoes, and the way he spoke made it clear he operated in a world far removed from hers. Yet here he was, offering her something, though she wasn't entirely sure what. The car pulled up to a modern building with a minimalist design. Large glass windows framed the entrance, with the words Ridgewell Foundation etched in sleek silver lettering. Inside, the space was warm and inviting, the kind of place where the world's problems might seem solvable. Victor led her to a conference room with a polished oak table and a view of the bustling city streets below. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? He asked. Clara shook her head. Her stomach churned, but it wasn't hunger. It was the anticipation of whatever this was. I'm okay. Just curious about why I'm here. Victor smiled, leaning forward with his hands clasped. Clara, what you did this morning, it wasn't just kind. It was brave. Most people would have looked the other way, worried about their job, or what others might think. But you didn't. Well, Clara replied, it's not like I had a plan. It just felt like the right thing to do. And that's exactly why you're here, Victor said. At the Ridgewell Foundation, we believe small acts of kindness can create a ripple effect, changing entire communities. We support grassroots initiatives, shelters, food banks, outreach programs, but we also look for individuals who embody those values to lead new projects. I think you could be one of them. Clara blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Lead? I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about running projects or... Victor raised a hand to stop her. No one starts as an expert. What matters is your heart and your willingness to learn. We'll provide training, resources, and a team. What do you say? Would you like to try? Clara hesitated. The idea seemed absurd, her, a leader. But as she glanced out the window at the city below, she thought of the man she had helped. She thought of all the others like him, invisible to most, just trying to get by. Maybe this was her chance to do more. Okay, she said, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. I'll try. Victor beamed. Good. We'll start small and build from there. The next day, Clara found herself back at the Ridgewell Foundation, her nerves jittery but her resolve intact. Victor introduced her to her mentor, a spirited woman named Naomi Park, who had a knack for turning ideas into action. Naomi's enthusiasm was infectious, and her confidence in Clara was both surprising and reassuring. First things first, Naomi said, handing Clara a binder. We're launching a pilot program for mobile food distribution. Think of it as a food truck, but instead of selling overpriced tacos, we'll be delivering hot meals to people in need. You'll help organize it. Clara flipped through the binder, overwhelmed by the spreadsheets, maps, and checklists. "This is a lot," she admitted. Naomi laughed. "It always looks like that at first. But trust me, you'll find your rhythm. Start by visiting the community we're targeting. Talk to the people. Hear their stories. That's where you'll find your focus." Clara's first visit to the West Side Neighborhood Community Center was eye-opening. The building was run down, its walls peeling and its floors scuffed, but it buzzed with activity. Volunteers sorted donations, parents lined up for groceries, and kids played in a makeshift corner filled with toys. She met Angela, the center's director, who was both no-nonsense and endlessly compassionate. "You're with Ridgewell?" Angela asked, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't expect them to send someone like you." "Someone like me?" Clara asked, her cheeks flushing. Angela shrugged. "Young, fresh, maybe a little out of your depth. But don't worry, you'll learn fast around here." Over the next few hours, Clara listened as Angela introduced her to families struggling with rising rents, seniors choosing between food and medicine, and young adults juggling multiple jobs just to survive. Their stories were heartbreaking, but they were also inspiring. Despite their struggles, there was a resilience in their eyes, a determination to keep going. By the time Clara left, she felt both humbled and energized. This wasn't just about handing out food, it was about restoring dignity and hope. The following weeks were a blur of planning, meetings, and sleepless nights. Clara worked closely with Naomi, Angela, and a team of volunteers to map out routes, coordinate donations, and design menus. She learned to navigate bureaucracy, convincing skeptical vendors to donate supplies, and persuading city officials to grant permits. Each small victory felt like a monumental step forward. The day of the pilot launch arrived sooner than Clara expected. The food truck, painted bright blue with the words "Meals on Wheels of Hope," rolled out of the Foundation's parking lot and into the heart of the West Side. Clara's heart pounded as they parked near a crowded intersection and opened the window. People lined up hesitantly at first, unsure if they could trust this new initiative. But as the first meals were served, steaming plates of spaghetti and warm rolls, smiles began to spread. Parents took plates for their kids, teenagers joked with the volunteers, and seniors thanked Clara with teary eyes. By the end of the day, they had served over 200 meals. Clara stood by the truck, exhausted but elated. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was making a real difference. As word of the program spread, so did support and resistance. Local businesses worried that the food truck would attract undesirables to their storefronts. A few even complained to the city council, arguing that the program was bad for business. One evening, Clara attended a council meeting to defend the initiative. She stood at the podium, her palms sweaty but her voice steady. "This program isn't just about feeding people," she said. "It's about building community, about showing people that they're seen and valued. Everyone deserves that, no matter their circumstances." The room fell silent as Clara spoke, her words carrying a conviction that even she hadn't realized she possessed. By the time she finished, the council members nodded in agreement, and the motion to shut down the program was dismissed. But not everyone was appeased. A few days later, Clara found graffiti scrawled across the side of the food truck. "Go back to where you came from." It stung, but it also strengthened her resolve. Naomi stood beside her as they scrubbed the paint away. "Change always ruffles feathers," she said, "but don't let it stop you. You're doing something important." Clara nodded, her grip on the sponge tightening. She wasn't about to give up, not when there was so much more to do. The success of the pilot program led to talks of expansion. Clara found herself thrust further into the spotlight, speaking at events, meeting donors, and sharing her story with reporters. She still felt like the same waitress who had handed a plate of food to a hungry man, but now she had a platform, and she intended to use it wisely. Her journey was far from over, but Clara was beginning to see the ripple effect Victor had talked about. What had started as one small act of kindness was growing into something far greater. And for the first time, she dared to believe that steady wasn't enough. She wanted to change lives, to challenge systems, to leave a legacy of compassion. As the sun set on another long day, Clara stood outside the food truck, watching as volunteers packed up the remaining supplies. The man she had helped weeks ago, now a regular volunteer, approached her with a smile. "Thank you, Clara," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "For everything." She smiled back, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and gratitude. "No," she said, "thank you for reminding me why this matters." The road ahead would be long and winding, but Clara was ready for it. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a catalyst for change, and she wasn't going to stop. Storms and solidarity. Clara Hart had thought she knew what it meant to work hard. Years of serving tables in a bustling diner had taught her endurance, patience, and the art of smiling through exhaustion. But nothing could have prepared her for the whirlwind that followed the launch of the Meals on Wheels of Hope program. The project had gained traction quickly, garnering praise from the media and gratitude from the communities it served. Yet it also drew criticism from some corners of Maple Ridge: business owners, skeptical politicians, and those who saw homelessness as an eyesore rather than a social challenge to address. The pressure mounted when Clara received an unexpected call from a city official one rainy Tuesday morning. The program's permits were being reviewed, and there was a possibility they'd be revoked. "Some concerns have been raised," the official said vaguely. Clara could hear the hesitation in his voice, as if even he didn't fully believe in the concerns being raised. "What kind of concerns?" Clara pressed, gripping the phone tightly. "Complaints about increased loitering near the truck stops. A few property owners aren't happy," he explained, his tone diplomatic but firm. Clara hung up, her heart sinking. It wasn't the first time she'd faced opposition, but the thought of the program being shut down so soon was unbearable. She knew what this would mean to the people they served, especially now, with winter approaching and the need growing daily. Later that day, Clara met with Naomi, her mentor, in the Ridgewell Foundation's conference room. Naomi had a knack for turning obstacles into opportunities, and Clara hoped she had some magic up her sleeve this time. "This isn't surprising," Naomi said, flipping through a thick folder of reports and complaints. "When you disrupt the status quo, you make enemies. The key is figuring out who's behind these complaints and addressing their concerns, or countering their influence." "How do we counter their influence when they have money and power?" Clara asked, her frustration slipping into her voice. "All we have is a food truck and volunteers." Naomi leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "We have more than that. We have the community. And if there's one thing I've learned in this work, it's that the power of people, unified and determined, can outweigh almost anything." The next step was clear. Clara needed to mobilize the community. Over the following days, she organized meetings at the Westside Neighborhood Community Center, inviting residents, volunteers, and anyone who had benefited from the program. The turnout was overwhelming. Parents with young children, seniors clutching canes, and teenagers with hopeful expressions packed the small hall. Angela, the center's director, opened the meeting with a fiery speech. "This isn't just about a food truck," she declared. "It's about standing up for each other and saying that everyone, no matter their circumstances, deserves dignity and support." Clara stepped up next, her nerves bubbling under the surface but her voice steady. "We've faced pushback, and we'll face more," she began. "But we've also seen what happens when we come together. Meals shared, connections made, lives touched. We can't let a few loud voices drown out the needs of so many." The crowd responded with cheers and applause. By the end of the night, dozens of people had signed up to volunteer, donate, or spread the word about the program. Clara left the meeting feeling a renewed sense of purpose, but she also knew the fight was far from over. As the community rallied, so did the opposition. Clara began receiving anonymous emails and messages accusing her of enabling homelessness and ruining the town's image. One night, she found a flyer taped to her apartment door. It read, "Maple Ridge deserves better. Say no to freeloaders and failed do-gooders. Clara's hand shook as she tore the flyer down. The attacks felt personal, and for the first time, doubt began to creep in. Was she really making a difference, or was she just stirring up conflict? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was Sam, the man she had first helped outside the cafe. Since joining the program as a volunteer, Sam had become one of her closest allies, offering insights and encouragement when she needed it most. "Hey, Clara," Sam said when she answered. "I heard about the flyer. You okay?" "I don't know," she admitted, sinking onto her couch. "It feels like no matter what we do, someone's out to tear it down." "That's because you're doing something that matters," Sam said, his voice steady. "The people who don't like it, they're scared. Scared of change, scared of losing control. But you're giving people hope, Clara. Don't let them take that away." His words bolstered her, and by the time they hung up, Clara felt the spark of her determination returning. The turning point came a week later during a city council meeting. Clara had prepared meticulously, gathering testimonials from community members and data showing the program's impact. Sam and Angela joined her, along with dozens of residents who packed the council chamber, holding signs that read "Hope on Wheels" and "Kindness Wins." Clara stood at the podium, her heart pounding. She began by recounting the program's success. The hundreds of meals served, the partnerships formed, and the stories of lives changed. Then she shared the challenges they faced, including the complaints and the threats to their permits. "This isn't just about food," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "It's about showing people that they matter. It's about reminding our city that compassion is a strength, not a weakness. I know change is hard, but progress always is. We can either fight for a better future or cling to outdated fears." When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Several council members nodded in approval, while others remained stoic. The decision would take time, but Clara felt a glimmer of hope. In the days that followed, support for the program swelled. Local businesses that had initially been skeptical began offering donations, inspired by the growing public sentiment. A bakery started providing fresh bread, and a nearby farm contributed produce. Even a few of the original complainants softened their stance, swayed by the stories of those helped by the program. But the opposition wasn't entirely silenced. Victor Kane, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, called Clara into his office one afternoon. "You've done well, Clara," he said, his tone both proud and cautious. "But you need to be prepared. The people who oppose us, they're not going to give up easily, and as this grows, so will the challenges." Clara nodded, her resolve firm. "I didn't come this far to back down." Victor smiled. "Good, because this is just the beginning." That evening, Clara returned to the food truck, now parked near the edge of the west side. The air was crisp, the stars bright, and the line of people waiting for meals stretched longer than she'd ever seen. Sam was there, serving plates with a practiced ease, and Angela handed out blankets donated by the community. Clara joined them, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the team work together. She thought of how far they had come, from a single act of kindness outside a cafe to a movement that was changing lives. There were still battles ahead, but Clara was ready for them. She wasn't alone anymore. As she handed a plate to a young boy who smiled shyly up at her, Clara felt a surge of hope. The road was long, but it was worth every step. Together, they were building something extraordinary, something that no amount of criticism or opposition could tear down. This was only the beginning. Shadows of resistance. Clara Hart stood on the balcony of the Ridgewell Foundation's downtown office, gazing at the city skyline. The glow of streetlights below was serene, masking the turbulence brewing in Maple Ridge. While the Meals on Wheels of Hope program had garnered widespread support, the forces against it were becoming more aggressive, and Clara could feel the weight of their resistance closing in. The graffiti on the food truck had been just the beginning. Anonymous messages and slanderous flyers circulated throughout the city, accusing Clara and the Ridgewell Foundation of enabling laziness and creating dependence. But these attacks weren't the most troubling development. Victor Kane had warned her of darker undercurrents, whispers of political maneuvers and powerful interests determined to see her program fail. "I've seen this before," Victor told her during a late-night meeting. "The people behind these campaigns aren't just upset about a food truck. They see what we're doing as a threat to their control over this city." Clara didn't need to be told twice. The program had already exposed gaps in Maple Ridge's social safety nets, highlighting the systemic failures that left so many vulnerable. For Clara, it wasn't just about feeding the hungry anymore. It was about fighting for a more equitable future. But she was beginning to understand that such fights came with risks. A new ally, a new challenge. One of those risks became evident when an unexpected ally stepped forward. During a community event in Westside, a young woman named Sophia Cruz approached Clara. Sophia was a journalist with a reputation for uncovering corruption, her sharp articles often rattling Maple Ridge's political elite. "I've been following your program," Sophia said, shaking Clara's hand. "And I've also been following the money. The opposition you're facing isn't random. It's coordinated. If you're willing, I'd like to dig deeper." Clara hesitated. She admired Sophia's work, but involving her felt like opening Pandora's box. "What exactly do you want to uncover?" she asked cautiously. "Who's funding the backlash?" Sophia replied. "And why?" Clara thought of the families lining up for meals, the volunteers who poured their hearts into the program, and the donors who believed in its mission. They deserved the truth. "Okay," Clara said, nodding. "I'll help in any way I can." Sophia's investigation uncovered startling revelations. A network of local businesses, wealthy landlords, and a few city council members had been pooling resources to discredit the program. Their goal wasn't just to stop Meals on Wheels of Hope, but to undermine any initiatives that threatened their financial interests. One name stood out among the list of funders: William Rothwell, the CEO of a major property development company, with a history of lobbying against affordable housing policies. Rothwell had been quietly funding campaigns to stoke public fear about homelessness, using misinformation to sway opinions. "This isn't just about the food truck," Sophia explained during a late-night meeting with Clara. "Rothwell wants to keep Maple Ridge gentrified and profitable for people like him. He's afraid programs like yours will expose the cracks in his empire." Clara felt a wave of anger and resolve. "Then we'll expose him first." Building the defense. Armed with Sophia's findings, Clara and Naomi devised a plan to counter the backlash. They launched a campaign called Voices of Hope, highlighting the personal stories of people impacted by the program. Short videos, social media posts, and community events featured individuals who had found not just meals but hope through Meals on Wheels. One video featured Anita, a single mother who had been struggling to feed her 3 children before discovering the program. Another highlighted Harold, a retired factory worker whose pension barely covered his rent. These stories humanized the program's mission, shifting the narrative from abstract policy debates to real, tangible impact. The campaign gained traction quickly, with local influencers, churches, and schools joining the effort. Even some businesses that had previously stayed neutral began to publicly support Meals on Wheels, donating food and funds. But for every story of hope, there were whispers of doubt. Rothwell and his allies doubled down on their efforts, releasing polished advertisements claiming that programs like Clara's encouraged dependency and drained public resources. Clara became a frequent target in their rhetoric, portrayed as an idealistic outsider, meddling in matters beyond her understanding. The personal attacks hurt, but Clara refused to back down. She leaned on her growing circle of allies: Naomi, Sophia, Sam, Angela, and Victor, each of whom brought unique strengths to the fight. Together, they formed a united front, determined to push forward despite the mounting challenges. A breakthrough and a betrayal. The turning point came during a city council meeting, where the renewal of Meals on Wheels permits was on the agenda. The council chamber was packed, with supporters and detractors alike filling every seat. Clara, flanked by Naomi and Angela, presented a comprehensive report detailing the program's achievements, its financial sustainability, and its plans for expansion. "This isn't just about food," Clara concluded, her voice steady. "It's about giving people a chance to feel seen, valued, and supported. That's what a community should be about." The room erupted in applause, but Clara noticed Rothwell in the back, whispering to a council member. Her stomach churned. She had suspected Rothwell's influence in the council, but seeing it confirmed was unsettling. The council ultimately voted to renew the permits, a major victory for the program. But the celebration was short-lived. Later that night, Clara received an anonymous tip from a city employee. One of her closest allies had been secretly leaking information to Rothwell. The revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. Clara replayed every conversation, every strategy session, trying to pinpoint who it could be. Was it someone from the Ridgewell Foundation? A volunteer? Someone from the community center? The uncertainty gnawed at her. "I'll find out who it is," Sophia promised. "And when I do, we'll deal with them." Strength in numbers. Despite the betrayal, Clara pressed forward. The program continued to grow, expanding its reach to new neighborhoods and forging new partnerships. Victor secured additional funding to purchase a second food truck, while Naomi organized a volunteer training program to ensure the initiative's sustainability. Sam, who had become a cornerstone of the team, suggested organizing a community festival to celebrate the program's successes and build solidarity. "People need a reminder of what we're fighting for," he said. Clara agreed, and the festival quickly took shape. Held in a large park on a sunny autumn afternoon, the festival was a resounding success. There was live music, games for kids, and food trucks serving meals to everyone. No questions asked. Clara watched as families laughed, volunteers worked tirelessly, and strangers became friends. This was what she had envisioned all along, a community coming together, united by compassion and hope. The gathering storm. But as the festival wound down and the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara received another ominous reminder of the fight ahead. A message from Sophia flashed on her phone. "We need to talk. I found something big." Clara's stomach tightened as she read the follow-up details. Rothwell wasn't just funding opposition campaigns. He was actively working to buy out properties in the West Side, displacing low-income residents to make way for luxury developments. The program wasn't just an inconvenience to him. It was a direct threat to his long-term plans. As Clara sat in her car, staring at Sophia's message, she realized the stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about saving meals on wheels of hope. It was about standing up to a system designed to silence and marginalize the most vulnerable. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The depths of corruption. Clara Hart sat in the dim light of her small apartment, her eyes glued to Sophia Cruz's investigative report sprawled across her kitchen table. Each page painted a clearer, more sinister picture of William Rothwell's network of influence. What had started as rumors and vague connections had solidified into undeniable proof. Rothwell and his associates were systematically displacing low-income residents to make room for high-end developments, erasing entire communities under the guise of progress. It wasn't just gentrification. It was exploitation on a grand scale. Families were being forced out of their homes with little notice or compensation, often coerced into signing agreements they barely understood. Many of the properties in question had ties to Rothwell's shell companies, which funneled profits back to his real estate empire. Sophia's voice crackled over the phone as Clara scanned the documents again. "This isn't just about him wanting your program gone," she said. "He's trying to wipe out any reminder of the people his developments have hurt. Your food truck and the community it serves. Those are living, breathing testaments to the damage he's done. He can't afford for you to keep going." Clara swallowed hard, the weight of the information pressing down on her. If we expose this, it won't just be about stopping him. It could change everything. "That's the idea," Sophia said, her voice steady. "But we need to be careful. People like Rothwell don't play fair." Clara hung up, her mind spinning. This wasn't just about feeding people anymore. It was about justice. And justice, she realized, would require more than just a food truck. An unlikely coalition. The next morning, Clara met with Naomi, Victor, Angela, and Sam at the Ridgewell Foundation's headquarters. The group was somber as Sophia laid out her findings, connecting Rothwell's developments to council members, shady zoning laws, and even eviction notices sent to West Side residents. Victor's face darkened as he flipped through the pages. "This isn't just unethical," he said. "It's criminal. If we can gather more evidence and rally enough support, we might have a shot at stopping him." "But how?" Angela asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "Rothwell has money, lawyers and politicians in his pocket. We're just us." "That's exactly why we'll win," Clara said, her voice firm. "He spent his career hiding in the shadows, but we have something he doesn't: people. If we bring this to the public, we can make it impossible for him to keep operating like this." Naomi nodded. "We'll need a two-pronged approach: legal action and public pressure. Sophia, can you work on connecting these findings to a larger investigative team?" "I already have contacts in mind," Sophia replied. "If we time this right, we can release the story and launch a campaign simultaneously." Victor turned to Clara. "And you'll need to lead the public side of this. You've become the face of this fight, whether you wanted to or not." Clara's stomach churned at the thought of stepping even further into the spotlight. The personal attacks, the threats, it was already more than she'd bargained for, but she couldn't turn back now. Too many people were counting on her. "Let's do it," she said, the plan in motion. Over the next few weeks, the team worked tirelessly. Sophia coordinated with national journalists, ensuring the story would get the attention it deserved. Victor used his connections to secure legal representation for the displaced residents, while Naomi organized town hall meetings to build public support. Clara threw herself into the campaign, meeting with community leaders, recording videos, and speaking at rallies. Her message was simple but powerful. This isn't just about stopping one man. It's about standing up for the people who've been ignored, silenced, and pushed aside for too long. Together, we can show that this city belongs to all of us, not just the wealthy few. The community responded with overwhelming support. Local artists painted murals celebrating unity and resilience, while small businesses displayed signs that read, "We stand with Clara." Donations poured in, allowing the Ridgewell Foundation to expand its outreach efforts. Even the food truck became a symbol of resistance, its bright blue exterior now adorned with handprints from residents as a show of solidarity. The opposition strikes back. As the campaign gained momentum, so did Rothwell's attempts to shut it down. One evening, Clara returned to her apartment to find a notice taped to her door. She was being evicted. The reason cited was non-compliance with lease terms, but Clara knew better. "Typical Rothwell move," Sophia said when Clara called her in a panic. "He's trying to rattle you. Don't let him." Clara moved into Naomi's spare room the next day, but the attacks continued. Anonymous threats flooded her email inbox, and false rumors about her past began circulating online. Clara tried to stay focused, but the constant barrage of negativity was taking its toll. "You're stronger than this," Sam told her one night as they worked side by side at the food truck. "And you're not alone. Remember that." His words were a balm to her frayed nerves. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. The climax. Unmasking Rothwell. The big day arrived. The investigative report was published, complete with damning evidence of Rothwell's corrupt dealings. The expose went viral within hours, sparking outrage across Maple Ridge and beyond. News outlets descended on the city, and protesters gathered outside Rothwell's office, demanding accountability. Clara and her team held a press conference that afternoon, flanked by residents who had been displaced by Rothwell's schemes. Anita spoke tearfully about losing her apartment after refusing to sign a predatory lease. Harold shared how his entire block had been bought out and demolished with no warning. Their stories put faces to the numbers, driving home the human cost of Rothwell's greed. "This is what we're fighting for," Clara said as cameras flashed around her. "Not just to stop one man, but to build a system that protects the most vulnerable instead of exploiting them." The fallout. The fallout was swift. Rothwell issued a statement denying all allegations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Several city council members implicated in the report resigned within days, and a federal investigation into Rothwell's companies was launched. For Clara, the victory was bittersweet. The battle had taken a toll on her physically and emotionally, and the fight was far from over. But the progress they had made was undeniable. The permits for Meals on Wheels of Hope were not only renewed but expanded, allowing the program to serve even more neighborhoods. As Clara stood on the steps of City Hall, surrounded by her allies and supporters, she felt a sense of pride and purpose she hadn't known was possible. They had faced immense opposition, but they had prevailed, together. The chapter ended not with a celebration, but with a commitment. Clara knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that change was possible. And as long as there were people willing to fight for it, she would be there, leading the charge. A new dawn. The first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds over Maple Ridge, casting a golden glow on the city's streets. Clara Hart sat on a bench outside the Ridgewell Foundation, sipping coffee from a paper cup. The air was crisp, carrying the promise of autumn's end and winter's arrival. Her hands trembled, though not from the cold. The battle against William Rothwell had been won, but it felt less like a victory and more like a pause in an ongoing war. Rothwell's empire was crumbling. Investigations into his dealings had intensified, and many of his assets were frozen. Yet Clara knew that systemic change required more than exposing one man's greed. It demanded a reimagining of the entire city's priorities. The Meals on Wheels of Hope program had become a symbol of that change, and its expansion was already underway. But with growth came new challenges, and Clara found herself questioning how to sustain the momentum they had built. Seeds of transformation. Later that morning, Clara joined Naomi, Sam, and Victor in the Ridgewell Foundation's conference room. The energy in the room was a mix of triumph and exhaustion, but also determination. "With Rothwell out of the picture, we have a unique opportunity," Victor began, his tone measured. "The city council is in disarray, and public pressure is at an all-time high. If we act quickly, we can push for policy changes that address the root causes of homelessness and displacement." Clara nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "What kind of changes?" "Affordable housing mandates," Naomi chimed in. "Stronger tenant protections, better funding for shelters, and incentives for community-focused development instead of profit-driven projects." Sam, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward. "We also need to focus on employment. Programs like this give people hope, but they need jobs to rebuild their lives. We could partner with local businesses to create pathways for training and hiring." Clara's mind raced. Each idea felt ambitious, but they were all necessary. "How do we start?" she asked. Victor smiled. "One step at a time. Let's prioritize housing and tenant protections first. Clara, the public trusts you. You'll need to continue being the face of this movement." The thought made her stomach flip. Clara had never intended to become a public figure, and the scrutiny that came with it was often overwhelming. But she also knew that her voice had become a rallying point for the community. "I'm in," she said, her voice steady. "Let's do it." A growing movement. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Clara worked with Naomi to organize public forums, inviting residents to share their stories and propose solutions. The events were emotional, often punctuated by tears and anger, but they also forged a sense of unity. One evening, a man named David stood up during a forum at the Westside Community Center. "I've lived here my whole life," he said, his voice trembling. "My parents bought our house when this was just a working-class neighborhood. Now I'm being priced out because developers see dollar signs where families used to be. I don't want to leave, but I feel like I don't have a choice." Clara approached him after the meeting, her heart heavy with his words. "We're fighting to make sure you and others like you can stay," she said. "But we can't do it alone. Will you join us?" David hesitated, then nodded. "If it helps my neighbors, I'm in." As more people like David joined the movement, Clara realized that they were building something far bigger than a program. It was a coalition, a network of ordinary people united by a shared vision for their city. The cost of leadership. Despite the progress, the pressure on Clara continued to mount. Anonymous threats arrived in her inbox, and false rumors about her finances and personal life began circulating online. One particularly vicious article accused her of using the Meals on Wheels program to pad her own bank account, a claim that was baseless but painful nonetheless. "Don't let them get to you," Naomi said during a late-night strategy meeting. "This is what happens when you challenge people in power. They fight dirty because they're scared." "I know," Clara replied, her voice tight, "but it's exhausting. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to help people." "And you are," Naomi said gently. "But leadership isn't about comfort. It's about courage. You've already shown you have that in spades." Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. If the attacks were the price of change, she would pay it. A vision for the future. As winter settled over Maple Ridge, the city council convened to vote on a package of housing reforms proposed by the coalition. The measures included capping rent increases, requiring developers to allocate a percentage of new units for affordable housing, and establishing a tenant advocacy office funded by the city. The council chambers were packed with residents, many wearing pins that read "Hope on Wheels." Clara stood at the podium, her heart pounding as she delivered her final plea. "This isn't just about policies," she said. "It's about people. It's about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their income, has a place to call home." Maple Ridge can either be a city that values profit above all else, or it can be a community that values its people. The choice is yours. When the vote was called, the reforms passed by a narrow margin. Cheers erupted in the chambers, and Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't a perfect victory. The measures were compromises, and the fight for implementation would be another battle. But it was a start. The ripple effect. In the months that followed, the impact of the reforms began to take shape. The Meals on Wheels of Hope program expanded to other neighborhoods, and Clara partnered with local organizations to create job training workshops. New tenant protections gave residents like David the ability to stay in their homes, while developers were held accountable for their actions. Clara found herself mentoring others who wanted to create change in their own communities. She realized that her role had shifted from being the voice of a movement to being a guide, helping others find their voices. One evening, as she worked late in the Ridgewell Foundation's office, Sam walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up," he said with a grin. Clara smiled, taking the cup. "Thanks. How's the new job going?" Sam had recently started working as a coordinator for the foundation, helping to oversee the food truck operations. "Busy," he admitted, "but in a good way. Feels like I'm actually making a difference." "You are," Clara said. "We all are." A new dawn. On the anniversary of the Meals on Wheels of Hope launch, the city held a celebration in the park. Hundreds of residents gathered, sharing food, music, and stories of resilience. Clara stood on a small stage, looking out at the crowd. She thought of all the challenges they had faced, the threats, the betrayals, the sleepless nights, and how far they had come. "This program started with one small act of kindness," she said. "And now, it's a testament to what happens when we come together. The fight for justice and equality isn't over, but today we celebrate how far we've come, and the future we're building together." The crowd erupted into applause, and as Clara stepped off the stage, she felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had changed her in ways she never could have imagined. She was no longer the quiet waitress from a small cafe. She was a leader, a fighter, and a voice for those who had been silenced. And she knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they would continue to shape a city where everyone could thrive, a city that truly belonged to its people.